Hello and welcome to this Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office training webinar. I am Christina Wyckoff. I'm the Section 106 Coordinator and Historical Archaeologist in the Oklahoma State Historic Preservation Office, and I will be talking to you today about documenting post-European contact archaeological sites in Oklahoma. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to enter those into the Q&A box. So I will emphasize right here at the beginning that the key point of this presentation is that when you're documenting a post-contact archaeological site, you have access to a lot of resources that can give you context for the information that you're providing, for the resource that you're documenting. And it's critical that you review that information and provide a summary of that information or references to that information in your site form. So to begin, before conducting an archaeological survey, you should be doing background research on the location of your project. That research should include a visit to the Oklahoma Archaeological Site Files at OAS, reviewing the National Register of Historic Places files through our website or in our office, reviewing any centennial farms that may be in your project area, looking at available historic maps, many of which are available online for free from your desktop computer. Historic aerial images, also many of which are available online and or could be emailed to you if you contact, for instance, the Oklahoma State University Library. Land patents, allotment records, and regional and local histories, among other things, which we'll discuss in this presentation. So again, make sure you're going to the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey to review the site files so you know what archaeological sites have already been documented, where your project is located, or in the general vicinity. Give you a heads up on resources that you might not otherwise recognize from historic maps or aerials. You may be able to get impressions about what you might be seeing in once you get boots on the ground. Again, National Register of Historic Places. We have an interactive map on our website which provides locations of National Register of Historic Places properties in the state for those properties whose locations are not restricted. So some resources will not have location information available in that map. However, those resources may be listed in our National Register of Historic Places database. You can search by county, you can search by resource name. Also, you can look at our determinations of eligibility list for your county and see if any archaeological sites that have been documented have been determined eligible for the National Register. You should also look at centennial farms and ranches. Keep in mind that centennial farms and ranches are, uh, this doesn't mean that we've collected data on every farm and ranch that have been um, in the same family's ownership for 100 years, but these are good places to start. So if you know there's a centennial farm and ranch in your area, there may well be archaeological materials associated with that occupation there. Historic maps. Like I said, there's a wealth of historic map resources available online. There are USGS topographic quadrangle maps. You can access a lot of these on TopoView, and they are referenced. So you can jump to your project location and go through time. You can look at a variety of scales and see if there were towns that may not be present now or homesteads maybe uh, railways or trails, etc. All of these give you indicators that there might be something going on adjacent to your project. You can also look at soil survey maps. Sometimes the topographic maps are not available for a big chunk of time. So maybe you have a resource and you're not, or you suspect a resource may be present, but you're not sure what the occupation of that resource might be, because you have a 1967 topographic quad where there's an open box. So you can look back at, let's say you don't have an earlier topo, you could look back at a soil survey map, perhaps from the 1930s or the 19 teens. You could also look at general land, rather, yes, certainly you can look at the general land office maps. I'll get to that in a minute, but also general highway maps can give you some information about likely likely occupations. Also, allotment maps, fire insurance maps. These can give you additional information about, for instance, the cultural affiliation of a property, or fire insurance maps can give you an incredible amount of detail about the resource itself. Again, general land office maps can give you information about mostly an earlier time period, though some of these are available the uh, for the 20th century too. Sometimes you can get a resurvey of a section that gives you some good detail. Also, when you're on that website, through the Bureau of Land Management, you might be able to get patent information, patent records for your project location, or your site location. So you could identify, without having to travel to the county courthouse, the allottee or person who received the land patent. Then you can jump ahead to the 1930s by looking at the WPA land ownership maps, which are available through the Oklahoma State University Digital Libraries website. And you can see if there's consistency in land ownership from your earlier map to this time, or from your later map back in time to this time. And you can also check these persons to see if you can determine a cultural affiliation or a community that the person, the owner, may belong to. Historic aerials will also help you define the occupation of your resource. It can help you define the occupation time if you and you can do this without having to travel. You can just look at these aerials online through the OK Maps Data Clearinghouse, uh, the Geological Survey, Oklahoma State University's library website, and the Oklahoma Corporation Commission. You can also look at shareok.org, and you may be able to find aerials here. These are also free. And historicaerials.com. This is a really easy resource to just jump to. You search by your uh, GPS coordinates or by street address, and then you can tag that aerials tab and see what aerials are available and go back in time. The only issue with this is the watermark, but if you're trying to determine what's located at what's going on at this location, you can look beyond that watermark for your own records. I wouldn't recommend using this aerial as a backdrop, as a base map, but it's still valuable. Before you survey, if there is a previously identified archaeological site within your project area, we recommend that you coordinate with our office or the Oklahoma Archaeological Survey regarding your proposed methods. And consider your background research in developing appropriate field investigations. If you Depending on what type of site or what type of resources you think might be there, what are you going to do to identify if features that showed up on maps or aerials are still present? And what if you can't see them above ground? How are you going to investigate for those resources? So, what I'd like to touch on now is how to document different resources that you're finding. Technically, an archaeological site is just any location where there's evidence of past human activity. Well, that includes a lot of things. And I don't believe that it's necessarily valuable to give a site trinomial to everything that meets that technical definition. But we do have a variety of ways of documenting resources. These include historic preservation resource identification forms, Oklahoma Historic Bridge Inventory forms, isolated find forms, and Oklahoma Archaeological Site Survey forms. So I'm going to go through just a few things and give you examples of how we can treat certain resources. So these are resources associated with Comanche Lake, with the dam at Comanche Lake. They were constructed by the WPA. They are illustrated on maps and aerials. We, in fact, have a form in our Oklahoma landmarks inventory for these resources right now. And I was contacted by a gentleman who wants to update this resource and was looking to give it a site trinomial. But these can more appropriately be documented on a historic preservation resource identification form. They're standing structures. We don't have buried deposits that we know of, and and those resources can be available to the public on our online database. This is a electric power pole and meter, which was identified during a survey. It is not associated with any kind of building, homestead, etc. It is a power pole in loose association with some oil activity and not with a building at an oil site either. So this resource could be, it's a structure. It could be documented on a historic preservation resource identification form, but really that wouldn't have much value for us or for anyone else. So I recommended that this be given an isolated find form instead. Honestly, you could just document this in your report and it wouldn't need its own form. This is an archaeological site. This is the location of a church at the community of Zion, and the you can see here the church has a stem wall remaining. There's a standing vestibule that was constructed later. We have other resources. We have a filled well. We have an artifact scatter, and together these are appropriately documented on an archaeological site survey form. So just about documenting your site. If you're going to be documenting an archaeological site survey form, you're going to need to provide maps, a sketch map to illustrate what's happening at the site location, and a topographic location map to show the boundaries of your site on a topo. And please do outline your site in red. That's helpful for our office. It's also helpful for others who review these. That it's easy to see, consistent, and useful. So if you could, please do outline your site boundary in red. Include photographs. We need to see what the site looks like and what the resources at the site look like. That includes site overview photos, photos of features, photos of diagnostic artifacts, and representative photos of non-diagnostic artifacts. Give a clear explanation of the archaeological methods that you employed. Include that in your site form. It's also going to be in your report, but it should be in your site form. Provide documentation of your shovel tests. Give us a map. Show us. It's particularly helpful if you number your shovel tests and have a key so that that documentation is clear. Where each artifact was recovered is available to any future researcher who's looking at your site form. Include your archival research and include the chain of title in the site form document. Keep in mind that the site form is not only going to occur uh, with the report. When a researcher, when an archaeologist is at the archaeological survey, they're not necessarily going to get that report with the site form. So make sure that all of the relevant information is in your site form, even if it means copying and pasting the content from your report into the site form as well. Just make sure that that document is complete and can stand on its own. So what information do you need to include in your site form? Make sure you're answering who, what, when, where, and why. And don't forget to demonstrate throughout how you know each of these things. Again, make sure that you're including good maps and photographs. You're illustrating the site dimensions, the site boundaries, and use red for those boundaries, and the locations of site features and artifact concentrations, etc. Make sure you're illustrating the site condition in your photographs and include photographs that show the site area, the features, diagnostic artifacts, and representative artifacts. Make sure that you're providing good location information. What is the legal? What are the dimensions and boundaries? And how did you determine those boundaries? Clearly indicate the location of any site features and deposits. It's great if you have a very accurate outer boundary, but where are the building resources within this? Maybe it's easy to tell on an aerial in some for some sites, but if your site is in a wooded area, for instance, that might be totally invisible without you clearly indicating where each resource is. Use reference points on the map that can be replicated in the future. So if your map is just a sketch map, even if it's just a sketch map, make sure that you've got a point there that says, oh, these are the coordinates at this location, and here are distances based off of those. Or this is a known intersection, and I am not doing a roadway project that's going to completely change the existing right of way and throw off all of my numbers after the project is complete. Give something that can be referenced later on. And don't forget to consider the community that the site belongs to. So sort of zoom out. What is the context of this, let's say, house occupation? Is it part of a rural community? Is it part of a town? Is it associated with an allotment? What's going on? That's really critical information. When Again, make sure you're giving information that indicates the time, the period of time during which the site is occupied. If this sounds ridiculous, I apologize, but we definitely get site forms that have no indication of the time when they were occupied. And that's critical information to understanding what is at the site location. So if you're just using maps, cite those maps. Tell us in the site description that the site is indicated on this map through this map, on these aerials, etc. And so there's uh, the potential occupation of this site is from this period to this period. And also if you know when certain features may have been constructed from aerials. The barn was constructed in this year, or the homestead appears to have begun here and then was expanded, etc. Investigate who owned or occupied the site and what is the cultural affiliation of site occupants, and provide support for your citing your resources. Tell us where you found that information, not just that you think maybe. And don't just list every person or every community that could possibly have been in that area. Uh, give us some kind of, and give yourself some kind of reference for where that information came from. And remember that cultural affiliation, which is a question on the site form, it's not historic non-Indian just because you don't know what it is. Uh, that I think that box gets checked a lot of the time because people aren't sure what the answer is. They're not sure what the affiliation uh, of a site is based on the work that they've done. And if you haven't done the work to determine that, don't check that box. You can indicate, you can turn in a site form without that box checked, but you need to make some effort to determine where the association of that resource. There are a lot of resources available to try and get at uh, who the parties associated with these sites are. And you can look to our website for some of that information, or rather to the Oklahoma Historical Society's website. There are city directories and newspaper records and all kinds of genealogy records. And Laura Martin gave a wonderful presentation for our Lunch and Learn in November on the secrets of the Oklahoma Historical Society Research Library. And you can use this link to access that recording and have a listen, see some of the stuff that you can use to help you better document archaeological sites. So I will emphasize that number 5, cultural affiliation, and number 6, historic phase identification on the Oklahoma site survey form are not perfect. And these, because they've been not perfect since the site form was initially developed, that data that we have previous, from all of the previous site survey forms that have been completed, it's less valuable than if we had good cultural affiliations for all of the sites, or at least good data indicating whether or not we have good data. Good data indicating whether or not there is information provided on what the associations of those sites are. But we can do better going forward, and we should. So please consider, how are we indicating an all-Black town or a freedmen homestead community or cemetery or another significant Black or African American site on our site form? Because we don't have a good box for that. Um, and make sure that you're using associated text fields to give that information when possible. Do the work to find who the site resource is associated with and include that information in your site form. And you can provide that information under number 23 in the site description. You can also include it in the text boxes under number 5 and number 6. So again, or continuing, consider if persons associated with the site were significant to local, state, or national history. And you do that by researching the individuals associated with the site to the best that you can, given the resource in question. Consider, is the site associated with a community who can better speak to whether the persons who occupied that site are significant? Then say so in the site form and encourage if you're doing this, if you are documenting the site as part of a Section 106 review, include that information for the agency to follow up on. So you can say, based on what we have, the information we have, this site is not associated with persons who are significant. However, it appears to be associated with this community. So we recommend pursuing or requesting that that community comment on the potential significance of the persons or the resource in question. So the Oklahoma Black Homesteader Project is a project through the University of Nebraska. However, this particular project is focused on Oklahoma, and Dr. Kalenda Eaton will be presenting on this project for our office in February. So we're excited to have her give a presentation discussing the resources that they're looking at. And I would encourage you to take a look at a video that they produced, or rather a presentation that was given recently on some of those resources, and how you can better identify Black homestead sites in Oklahoma. So I'm including the link here, but look also for the presentation upcoming in February. Also, have a look at the Freedmen Bureau search portal and all of the resources available on the Oklahoma Historical Society's website. Make sure you're discussing what the site represents. What is the site type? What purpose did the site serve? Why was it there? And again, provide support and cite your reference or your resources for that information. What belongs in the site description? Well, please include the location and dimensions, features, notable artifacts, summarize the artifacts, and note the integrity of the remaining features, whether artifact deposits are intact, what the depth of archaeological deposits is, etc. Basically, your site description should cover the site form. I would like to be able to read the site description and know what's going on at the site. Uh, you should be able to take that content by itself and have a good understanding. It is critical to still be filling out all of the rest of the site form because that information is valuable and it's appropriate for it to be broken down so that a person who's looking specifically at artifacts, for instance, can see what artifacts you have identified at the site. We are shovel testing methodology. What was that? But put everything together in a cohesive manner in the site description. Make sure you're including a discussion of the site occupation and persons. For instance, is this an allotment? Uh, who is the patentee? What are the other owners and occupants during the occupation of the site? And don't forget to include a chain of title with the site form. If you're doing the work to research the, to do the deed research for this resource, include that list at least with your site form. That way, if you're saying there are no significant persons associated with this site, you're still showing who the persons associated with the site are. So another person can take a look at this or say there are tribal persons associated with the site. Tribe could look at the site and confirm or deny whether those persons have significance. State when the site would have been occupied. Again, provide clear dates of occupation and reference maps, aerials, etc., that support the occupants and the time period during which the site was occupied. Significance and integrity. This is the biggest thing for me. Um, a lot of archaeologists treat these as the same thing. Now, significance and integrity are different, and both need to be taken together in order for a site to have National Register eligibility. But remember that integrity describes the quality of information contained in an archaeological property, and integrity is not an absolute quality of a property. It is relative to the significance. So for properties eligible under criterion D, integrity relates directly to the types of research questions in the research design. Think about the information at the site and how it can answer the research questions. Keep in mind, especially given that these are post-contact sites, that a site can have significance under other criteria than criterion D. Post-contact sites can certainly, as can pre-contact sites, but speaking specifically about post-contact sites, sites can be significant under criterion A, under criterion B, and under criterion C. So make sure in your site form you're discussing that. Don't just tell me that there are not significant archaeological deposits and therefore the site has no integrity. You need to be discussing the different, you need to be discussing integrity relevant to each criteria of significance. So make sure you're providing and supporting a site eligibility assessment. And remember to consider criteria beyond criterion D. Please provide good illustration for your site. Give a good site location map. Make sure it's illustrated on a 7.5 USGS topographic quad and outlined in red. Provide a site sketch map to show what's going on within the boundaries of the site. Show features, show testing locations, surface artifacts, and indicate positive and negative shovel tests. And provide a datum or other clear point of reference for someone in the future. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's looked at a site form and tried to relocate a site based on a sketch map that has no points of reference, no distance from a road, or maybe it was based off of a 2-track that's no longer present and can't be found. Give a good datum. Include overview photos, uh, what the site looked like at the time you documented it. Feature photos, again, so you're illustrating what those features look like at the time of your documentation, and photographs of the artifacts. If they're diagnostic, show them individually. If they aren't, give a representative sample. So here are a couple of examples of site sketch maps. On the left, you have resources indicated in proximity to one another. It notes that the map is not to scale, and there's no clear datum. There's nothing that you can look back on and know for sure that this is what was indicated, unless the site features are still present. On the right, you have street names, you have a map that's to scale, and you have artifact deposits and features and test locations indicated. Here's another, which is on top of an aerial image. So the aerial image has a date, which is given outside of this image I've copied. There are street names. There's a red outline of the site location. Different features are indicated and numbered. Positive and negative shovel tests are indicated. All of this is good information. Make sure that you're producing a record that's going to be useful. Provide citations and locations of maps or aerials that will facilitate a future archaeologist in confirming the information you've presented. Archaeology is a science, and science is about being able to replicate the investigations. Include the chain of title or other archival research so that that information can be confirmed and easily accessed by researchers in the future, and or so individuals can further assess the potential significance of individuals associated with your site. And again, make sure you're including clear maps and photos and illustrations. So to show that you're doing, well, good documentation of these resources includes an investigation of potential significance, support for presence or lack of integrity associated with the site. Clear description and good illustrations, maps, photos, etc. And this is just to show you that Matt Pierce and I are going to be giving a presentation in January, going step by step, question by question through the Historic Preservation Resource Identification Form and the Oklahoma Archaeological Site Survey Form for OK SHPO reviews, indicating like what needs to be included in each portion of the site form and the HPRI form. And that is all of the content of my presentation. I see that Deb has noted, please describe the site in detail with all the important location information that will help to find a site in the future. Remember that the various site form sections are to help with coding. Section 23 must be a thorough description of the site physical characteristics. Thank you, Deb. I 100% agree. Please tell me that somebody has a question. I'm sure you must have some questions about
Okay,
this information.
Christina, it's Linda, and there is a question for you, at least one. Do you have a template for mapping that you would like us to use?
So I don't have an existing template, but I could certainly produce something that would include the information that I need. And I would be happy to do that. And I will do that, and I'll make it available at our presentation in January. Thank you for that question.
Another question someone posed, how do you get maps from OSU?
So there are a number of maps available from the Oklahoma State University's digital libraries website. And I actually have a list of useful links, which I will add to the handouts in just a second. That has a link to that website. They also have a contact page where you can send an email if you're looking for a particular aerial image. If you include the legal location and email the individual at their website, they can send you back via email the image that you're requesting. It's very helpful.
Hey, and there's one more question that I see right now. Please, again, everyone, enter in any questions you might have for Christina. This question is, what do you do when you come across a ruins of a barn? We understand that barns have been surveyed in the past. Do you consider those historic resource ID form, or is that an archaeological form?
So certainly, if you have a barn, you should be documenting that on an HPRI form. If you also have additional deposits associated with it, then it would be appropriate to document an archaeological site survey form. And your archaeological site survey form can include a feature that is your barn. And so your archaeological site survey form would indicate that feature one, let's say, is a barn resource, which is also documented as building one on my HPRI form. So two separate forms for two separate purposes. The archaeological site survey form is a complete document, but can also reference that HPRI form, which will then be separately documented on our Oklahoma Landmarks Inventory database.
Had kind of posted the same question in the chat box. So if you want to read that one and make sure that we actually answered her, I think that
Yes.
pretty much answered the same thing.
Yes, and so ultimately the answer is you may need to produce both depending on what materials are present at the site. If all that you have is a standing barn and that's it, you have nothing in your shovel tests, you don't have other associated features, then yes, an HPRI form would be perfectly appropriate. I see a comment that says, thank you for emphasizing the importance of documenting the background information required. We had a report sent to us from a contractor, and when we in the agency requested additional information, his response was, you know how long that would take me. Yes, I mean, this is our job to identify these resources, and if we're not making an effort to determine whether they are significant, then what is the point? So it's critical to do the work. And thanks for highlighting that, Johnny. So I do have this link. Let me see if I can drop it here. Okay, now my only concern is that I'm not sure how to move this to my handouts, but I do have this document which I shared in the presentation yesterday on Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and this includes I'm going to hide my little picture for a second so that I can make this bigger. This includes a bunch of information on Section 106 and the nope, hold on a second. I've got another. Let's tell you what. I am going to make that map map resource available in the presentation in January as well, since it's not right here.
Christina, we've had another question come in.
Yes.
This is from Greg Maggard. Thanks for the excellent presentation. As I understand it, the SHPO fact sheet asked for deed research to be completed on the historic era sites with features present. Please correct me if that is wrong. Can you provide some guidance on assessing eligibility under criteria A or B on sites with no features?
So if you have no features present, criteria A or B would definitely be more challenging. I would say that deed research is to be completed on historic era sites with integrity. And so if you feel that you have a site that has intact deposits, you should also be considering that as integrity. But yes, yes, you can look at those maps and aerials like I indicated to get some idea about potential significance of a resource, even if you don't have intact features. And again, the availability of these resources means that you don't have to do a lot of extra work to be able to identify that something may have additional significance. If you can see that in the maps and aerials. And if you can't, then say that. This, we did this research, we did this background research, and based on that, there's nothing to indicate significance. Does that help to answer your question? And I will add that I intend to attempt some clarification of that fact sheet 12. I think that there is some language that could maybe be a little more clear. So I intend to make some adjustments to that in the future, but I have not done so at this time.
And I will also add that Matt Pierce will be doing his workshops next week, which absolutely address criteria A, B, C, and D in depth. And it will apply to both standing structures and archaeology.
Yes, definitely encourage everyone here to attend that. Well, I really appreciate everyone attending today. If you have additional questions, I hope you'll reach out to me. I am always available. So again, we will be giving a presentation January 12th that will discuss the site form in more detail. And in the meantime, let me know if there's anything else that you would like us to discuss at that presentation. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone.